Hi guys, another lonely day at school. I am going to continue with Ella Enchanted, where we left off yesterday. Um, Remember that Ella saw a journal entry by Arita in her magic fairy book that talked about Prince Char in a conversation that she had had with him. And then Char was coming back home and was going to have 3 fancy balls to pick a bride or celebrate his return after being gone for a year. Okay, so December 12th, the day of the first ball, dawned clear and mild, but by noon clouds had gathered and the wind had become sharp and cold. My gowns hung in Mandy's wardrobe. The glass slippers Char and I had found were safely buried at the bottom of my carpet bag. Since they'd be hidden under my petticoats, there was little likelihood that Char would see and identify them. Hattie's preparations began after breakfast and continued endlessly. "It's not tight enough, Ella. Pull harder." "Will that do?" My fingers were striped red and white from tugging at her laces. If she could still breathe, I wasn't to blame. "Let me see." She curtsied at herself in the mirror and rose, panting and smiling. "I shall be desolate if you don't remember me, Prince," she cooed at her reflection. Then she spoke over her shoulder. "Am I not magnificent, Ella? Don't you wish you could look as I do and go to the ball?" "Magnificent, ravishing, yes, I wish I could. Anything to make her go." "Pearls would set my hair off to advantage. Fetch them, there's a good girl." 2 hours later, after Mum Olga called her 3 times and threatened to leave without her, she declared herself perfect and departed. At last I was free to bathe and dress. Instead of the kitchen soap I usually used, I helped myself to Hattie's store of bath oils and fragrant soaps. Mandy produced a fleecy towel and a fine scrub brush. "Tonight I'll be your lady-in-waiting," she said, pouring steaming water into the tub. "When your servant is your fairy godmother, you're never scalded and your water never gets cold. You become sparkling clean, but the water never gets dirty." I soaked away a year of cinders and grime and Mum Olga's orders and Hattie's edicts and Olive's demands. When I rose from the bath and stepped into the robe Mandy held for me, I was no longer a scullery maid, but the equal of anyone at Char's ball. My gown was a spring green embroidered with leaves of darker green and plump yellow buds. Mandy had done her work well. In accordance with the latest fashion, my waist tapered to a narrow point and my train trailed 2 feet behind me. In the glass, I saw Mandy curtsy. "You're lovely, lady." She seemed close to tears. I hugged her. She squeezed me tight and I inhaled the sweet smell of freshly baked bread. I turned back to the glass and raised my mask, which covered most of my forehead and half of my cheeks, with small holes for my eyes. With half my head hidden, my mouth appeared strange and unknown even to me. The transformation was thorough. With the mask, I was not Ella. Nor was I perfectly dressed. I had no jewelry. My throat was unfashionably bare, but it would have to do. I didn't have to be the most elegant creature at the ball. I only had to see Char. When I ran down to our front door, I discovered that icy rain was falling in sheets. If I walked the 1/4 mile to the castle, I would be soaked. I could go to the ball without jewelry, but not wet through and shivering. "Mandy, what can I do?" I asked. "Oh, sweet, you can stay home," she said. I knew there would be 2 more balls, and that it probably wouldn't sleet tomorrow, but it might, and I had set my heart on going tonight. "Isn't there some small magic, a fairy umbrella, something that would keep me dry?" "No, love, not small magic." The weather was such a stupid thing to separate me from Char. Mandy hadn't made the rain, but she could have ended it. "I wish you were a real fairy, one who wasn't afraid to do anything." I had a crazy idea and acted on it without considering its wisdom. I said the words Lucinda had taught me. "Lucinda, come to my aid." If anyone would think keeping me dry wasn't big magic, that one would be Lucinda. "Ella," Mandy protested, "don't." The order came too late. Lucinda appeared between us. She still looked old, but she stood straighter than she had last time I'd seen her, and many of her wrinkles had disappeared. "Ah, sweet child, you need my help." She smiled, and the young Lucinda shone through. "So long as it's not too big, I shall do what I can." I explained. "Going to a ball like that? No, it won't do." She touched my neck, and it was hung so heavy with jewels that it took all my finishing school training to keep my head up. Mandy snorted. Perhaps it's too much for small magic, Lucinda agreed. The weight vanished, replaced by a thin silver chain from which hung a white lily made of the same kind of glass as my slippers. I felt a slight pressure on my head and lifted off a tiara fashioned as a garland of the same flowers. It's beautiful, I said. Lucinda replaced it on my hair. Now, you need a coach. That shouldn't be too troublesome. How can you call a coach small magic? Mandy demanded. And horses and a coachman and footmen, people and animals? You've forgotten your lesson. No, I haven't. I won't shape them from the air. I'll form them out of real things. That should satisfy your scruples, Mandy dear. Mandy grunted, which I knew was not agreement, but Lucinda continued happily. Earlier this evening in Frel, I spied a giant's cart filled with pumpkins. An orange coach will be splendid. A rumbling noise reached us. Outside, a mass darker than the storm took shape and grew larger. A 7-foot-high pumpkin rolled toward us and came to rest in the street outside the manor. I watched Lucinda. She muttered no incantations, waved no wand. For a moment, her gaze shifted, and she seemed to stare within, not out. Then she winked at me. Look, child. The pumpkin had been transformed into a gleaming coach with brass door handles and windows through which lacy curtains peeked. Mice will make plump horses, she said. 6 fat brown mice raced across the tiles of the hall. They vanished, and 6 horses appeared before the coach. A white rat became the coachman, and 6 lizards were transformed into footmen. They're wonderful, I said. Thank you. She beamed. Mandy glowered. Anything can happen, you idiot. What can happen? Said Lucinda. I'll make it safer. Ella, you'll have to leave the ball early. At midnight, your coach will become a pumpkin again, and the animals will regain their original shape until your next ball. The tiara and necklace will disappear. I would have only 3 hours with Char. They would have to be enough. Ah, how glorious to be young and going to a ball. Lucinda vanished. Glorious? Yes, to see Char. Nothing more. Goodbye, Mandy, I said. Wait. She ran to the kitchen. I stood impatiently and gazed outside. As I watched, an orange carpet unfurled itself and rolled from the coach's door to ours. If I waited much longer, it would be wet and useless. Mandy returned with her umbrella, uncompromisingly black and with 2 bent spokes. Here, love, I hope you won't be sorry. I won't hug you and muss your dress. She kissed me. Go now. I stepped onto the carpet and raised the umbrella. The coachman jumped down from his perch and opened the carriage door. Chapter 27. A few guests were still arriving when my carriage reached the castle. Before I emerged, I made certain my mask was securely tied. I had been here before, as a week-old infant brought to meet my sovereign, but not since. The hall was twice as tall as Mum Olga's. Every wall was covered with tapestries, hunting scenes, court scenes, pastoral scenes. Along the walls to my right and to my left, a line of marble pillars marched to the end of the hall. I tried not to gape. Soon I'd be counting windows. Mistress, a young squire offered me a glass of wine. It was delightful not to be a servant. The prince is greeting his guests, there, in the queue. He waved at a file of courtiers, mostly women, that wound from the huge double doors to the prince, a small figure at the far reach of the hall. Most of the women had already unmasked, so Char would be sure to see their lovely eyes or classical noses. The squire added, they're each scheming to make the prince propose marriage on the spot. He bowed. Dance with me, lady. The line will wait. An order. A group of musicians played near the prince, and perhaps a dozen guests danced. With pleasure, I said, pitching my voice a tone lower than usual. My eyes kept straying from my partner. Char smiled at each guest, bowed, nodded, spoke. Once he laughed. Making him laugh had been my domain. The damsel who caused the laughter was of middle height, slender, with blonde wavy hair cascading to her waist. She had removed her mask, but her back was turned, so I couldn't see her face. Hattie and Olive and Mum Olga weren't in line. They were probably off eating somewhere, but Hattie would certainly return soon. She wouldn't leave a room for long while Char occupied it. My dance ended as the clock struck the 10:15. Thank you, I said. No squire can hold a lady's attention tonight. He left me. Just over 2 hours remained. I retired to a chair at the edge of the hall, as close to Char as I dared. 3 gentlemen asked me to dance, but I declined each invitation. I became simply a pair of eyes, staring through my mask at Char. I needed no ears because I was too far off to hear his voice, no words because I was too distant for speech, and no thoughts. Those I saved for later. He bent his head. I loved the hairs on the nape of his neck. He moved his lips. I admired their changing shape. He clasped a hand. Once, the power of my gaze drew his eyes. I looked away quickly and noticed Hattie hovering a few feet beyond the line, her lips clenched in a fawning smile. He spoke to the last guest, last but one. My resolution to be unseen gave way. The last in line would be me. I rose and hurried to reach him before Hattie could pounce. I curtsied. He bowed. When we both straightened, I found I had grown closer to his height. "What is your name, lady?" He smiled politely. I found my voice with difficulty. "Layla." We were silent. "Do you live here in Frel, Lady Layla?" "In Bast, Highness. I named a town near the Elves' Forest." He looked past me, ready to move on. "I hope you enjoy the ball and your stay in Frel," he said. I couldn't let him go. "Abensa Uhodu," I spoke with a heavy Kyrian accent. "You speak Aorthian?" His attention was captured. "Not well. My uncle was born there. He's a singer. His voice can charm wood." Char's smile was genuine now. I miss their songs. I was glad to leave, but now I miss everything. I hummed a stanza of Arita's favorite song, a sad one about a farmer whose family is starving. Char joined me, singing softly. Near us, heads turned. I saw Hattie frown with her smile still frozen in place. When we finished, he bowed again. "Would you favor me with a dance?" he asked. Over all the others, I was his choice. I curtsied, and he took my hand. Our hands knew each other. Char looked at me, startled. "Have we met before, lady?" "I've never left Bast, but I've longed to see Frel my whole life," I said. He nodded. The clock struck 11. The dance was a gavotte, too spirited for talk. Rapid movement was a relief in the midst of so much feeling. We flew through the hall, perfectly in step. Char smiled at me. I smiled back, happy. We separated. I twined arms with a succession of momentary partners, dukes, earls, knights, squires, and back to Char. A final whirl, and the dance ended. "I love a gavotte," I said, touching to make sure my mask was still properly in place. The rush, the sweep, the whoosh. What nonsense was I talking? "It's the same with stair rails, the same feeling," he said. "Do you like to slide?" His voice was eager. Stair rails? Did he suspect me? I forced a sigh. "No, Majesty, I'm terrified of heights." Oh, his polite tone had returned. "Do you?" I asked. "Do I what?" he said. "Like to slide down stair rails." "Oh, yes, I used to." "I wish I could enjoy it. This fear of heights is an affliction." He nodded, a show of sympathy, but not much interest. I was losing him. "Especially," I added, "as I've grown taller." He stared, then he laughed in surprised delight. I was a fool for behaving so much like myself. The clock struck the half hour. Char started. "Half after 11? I've neglected my guests." He became the courteous host again. "Refreshments are in the next room, if you care to partake of them." He waved at an archway, then, "I'll look for you later," he said. He hoped to see me again? Layla, that is. I hurried out of the hall. Outside, the sleet had stopped. The pumpkin coach glistened in a line of black carriages. I climbed in. When we arrived at home, the coachman handed me out, remounted, and flicked his whip. The horses started off. In the morning, Hattie told me about her share in the ball, bidding me to sit on a low stool while the family ate their breakfast. "He danced with me," Hattie said, her teeth stained purple from a blueberry muffin, "and only good manners prevented him from spending the rest of the evening at my side." "When will you pay me?" Olive asked. "Must I pay? Aren't you glad you danced with the prince?" "You said you'd give me 3 coins for every time he couldn't dance with anyone else because of me. You owe me," she thought, "8 coins. "How many times did he dance with you?" I asked. 3 times. I asked him 4 times, but the last time he said he had to see to his other guests. Now, math lesson in our reading. Can you find the error in Olive's math? She was supposed to get 3 coins for every time, and she said she needed 8 coins, but she danced with the prince 3 times. So, figure out the math, find her error, because remember, she's not the brightest bulb. All right. Have a great day, everybody. We will read more tomorrow, and I will, see you later. Bye.